Did you really think I wouldn't find out what you did to me? The words sliced through the still air like glass. Clarice Monroe stood at the head of the HR conference table, one hand gripping her phone, the other clenched at her side. Her icy blue eyes locked on Jordan Hayes as she held up a dimly lit photo of herself, disheveled, half-lit by morning sun, lying in bed like the aftermath of something shameful. "A man like you, alone with a woman like me," she said, her voice dripping with implication. "You know what that looks like." Jordan didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He simply nodded, slow and steady, like a man who had rehearsed for this exact moment long before it arrived. It wasn't supposed to be this way. 2 nights ago, the company had thrown a holiday party in a downtown Chicago rooftop lounge, all designer cocktails and fake laughter. Jordan had shown up, stayed long enough to be polite, and sat in the corner, sipping ginger ale while managers danced on expense accounts. Clarice had been the star of the night, young, dazzling, reckless. She drank too much. By the end, she was nearly collapsed in the bathroom, crying into her own arms while most of her executive team had already disappeared into Ubers or after-parties. Jordan didn't even like her. Not really. But he saw her there, a mess of mascara and champagne, and he remembered what it was like to be abandoned. He offered to drive her home. No touching, no awkward words. Just helped her walk to the car, buckled her in, dropped her off, made sure she got into her apartment. Then he left. That was it. He didn't even enter the building. But here they were now, HR lawyers, and Clarice with her smirk armed with an image and a narrative she'd crafted while Jordan was reading bedtime stories to his daughter Alyssa. It hadn't taken long for the mood at the office to turn. The following morning, Jordan noticed it first in the silence. The way greetings were half-formed. The way eyes slipped past him in the hallway. Then came the email. "We need to have a quick conversation regarding recent conduct," and he knew. He had seen it before. Subtle at first, when he was the only black engineer on his team, and somehow the only one whose code had to be double-checked. When his project proposals went missing before presentations, when Clarice would praise his insights in meetings and then promote someone else entirely. He didn't need her approval. He needed her not to ruin him. Jordan had lived his entire life walking the tightrope between invisibility and suspicion. Raised in foster homes, molded by military structure, hardened by nights of silence, and mornings of being underestimated. He never said much, but he watched everything. And over time he learned it's not the loud ones who win, it's the ones who prepare in silence. When Clarice hinted at something inappropriate the day after the party, he knew exactly what she was planning. She didn't say it outright. She didn't need to. Just let it simmer. Let people assume. Let him defend himself while she played the fragile victim. The image would do the rest. So he went home that night and opened the encrypted backup system he'd built for himself, not out of paranoia, but out of habit. From his smartwatch, synced without Clarice ever knowing, he retrieved everything GPS timestamps of him leaving her building at 3:27 a.m., audio logs from the ride, where she slurred apologies for being a shitty boss, and even the automated video snippet from his dash cam showing her stumbling to her own door alone. He didn't panic. He didn't react. He simply saved the files to 3 different cloud vaults and printed one hard copy. That night, while helping Alyssa with her math homework, she looked at him and asked Dad, "Are you okay?" He smiled and kissed the top of her head. "I'm fine, baby. Sometimes people try to make the truth look blurry. But don't worry. The truth has receipts." What Clarice didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the man sitting silently across from her now wasn't just some polite engineer with good manners. He was a strategist, a soldier, a father. And he had already begun a quiet war she wouldn't even know she was losing until it was far too late. The moment Jennifer from HR appeared at his desk the next morning, Jordan knew it was starting. She didn't meet his eyes. Her voice was soft, rehearsed. "Jordan, can we speak privately for a moment?" There was no confusion in her tone, no casual pretense, just tension, heavy and inevitable. Around him, the office air shifted. Colleagues glanced away too quickly. Conversations dipped to whispers. Jordan stood smooth the sleeves of his navy sweater and followed her down the hallway, like a man walking toward something he'd already accepted. The conference room smelled like printer toner and bad intentions. Clarice was already seated, a glass of water untouched in front of her, flanked by 2 company lawyers. Her expression was perfectly neutral, polished, professional, and cold. the kind of expression that had never once been mistaken for guilt. Mr. Hayes, one of the lawyers, began, "We've received a concern about a possible breach of boundaries involving an interaction between yourself and Miss Monroe after the holiday party." Jordan didn't blink, a concern he repeated calmly. Clarice leaned forward, playing her part. "I'm not accusing anyone of anything yet, but I woke up in a vulnerable state, disoriented, alone, and I know that I was driven home by someone I barely know, and I don't remember everything." Jennifer shifted uncomfortably. The lawyers remained still. It was all unfolding exactly how Clarice wanted, planting uncertainty, inviting suspicion, never saying anything too concrete. Just enough poison to cloud the room. Jordan glanced at the phone she had placed carefully on the table, like it was meant to be seen but not touched. He nodded toward it. "May I?" Clarice slid it forward without hesitation. The photo again. Same as yesterday. Her in bed, tousled, a sliver of thigh showing makeup smudged just enough. He stared at it for a long moment, then asked, "What time was this taken?" "Around 7 a.m., she replied. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Interesting. That was nearly 4 hours after he'd left her apartment." He had the dash cam footage, GPS data, and a digital log of her front door closing behind her at 3:27 a.m. She had taken this picture herself long after she'd been alone. It wasn't evidence. It was fiction, and she had underestimated him deeply. But Jordan didn't present any of that, not yet. He simply slid the phone back across the table and folded his hands. "I understand this is serious," he said, "and I want the truth to come out clearly, for everyone's sake." That answer, calm and composed, seemed to irritate Clarice more than any argument would have. She wanted him flustered, defensive, angry. Instead, he was composed, silent, dangerous. By that afternoon, the company placed him on temporary unpaid leave, pending further internal review. No appeal, no real explanation. Just a clinical HR email and an access badge that no longer worked by the time he reached the parking garage. He drove home in silence, the city skyline passing like a slow reel of memories. Not once did he feel afraid. He had lived through worse, but he did feel something else: responsibility. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about the pattern, the system, the countless other voices that had been drowned out by people like Clarice. That evening, after Alyssa went to bed, Jordan made a call. Amanda Rodriguez picked up on the second ring. "Ms. Rodriguez," he said, "my name is Jordan Hayes. I believe you've worked with a woman named Sarah Chun." Amanda was quiet for a beat. "I have. She told me about you. Said you might be the missing piece." "I'm not just a piece," Jordan replied. "I have proof. Years of it." The next morning, he sat across from Amanda in a small office filled with case files and the quiet hum of justice in motion. On his laptop, he opened a secure folder titled Pattern Proof. Inside, spreadsheets showing rating discrepancies by race, internal emails with veiled language about cultural fit, private Slack messages from leadership joking about diversity quotas, and most damning of all, audio recordings, private conversations, boardroom meetings, and offhand remarks that Clarice never imagined could be used against her. Amanda stared at the screen, impressed. "How long have you been compiling this?" "Since I saw the pattern," Jordan said. 2.5 years. She leaned back, whistling low. "You built your own surveillance system. I built a shield," he corrected. "Now I'm just choosing when to raise it." By the end of the meeting, Amanda had already started drafting a complaint to the DOJ. Clarice didn't know it yet, but she had stepped on a landmine, one planted by a man who had spent years walking the battlefield, mapping every inch. And now, with his reputation already wounded, his job on the line, and his daughter asking questions he could no longer answer with simple promises, Jordan was ready to show the world what happens when the quiet ones finally speak. Amanda didn't waste time. The moment Jordan walked out of her office, she was already making calls. By noon the next day, she had sent the first legal notice to the company, requesting preservation of all internal communications related to performance reviews, hiring decisions, and employee complaints over the past 3 years. A warning shot, measured, professional, but packed with implications. Jordan read the CC'd email on his phone and smiled faintly. It had begun. That evening, Amanda called again. Her voice had a different edge, now sharper, more focused. Jordan, I just listened to one of the audio files you labeled Exec Meeting Raw '04. Did you realize Clarisse is openly admitting to manipulating promotion metrics in that one? I did, Jordan said calmly. I figured I'd let you hear it from her voice, not mine. Amanda exhaled. This isn't just a hostile workplace claim. This is systemic discrimination, Jordan. If the DOJ hears that recording, they will, he replied. But not yet. Amanda paused. You're holding back, I'm setting the stage, he said simply. She doesn't know she's already lost. Clarisse, meanwhile, continued playing her role perfectly. In her circle, she spoke of decisiveness, of removing a threat before it escalated. She framed it as a leadership moment, a tough call made by a woman who wouldn't be intimidated. At cocktail brunches with other executives, she boasted about her firm grip on culture, about how she'd handled an HR risk without letting it go public. Jordan had access to all of it. The company's VoIP system had long been monitored quietly, subtly, by a diagnostic tool Jordan himself had helped design before he was ever reassigned to analytics. He knew the tool could store voice packets from private calls and transcribe them. Nobody bothered to turn it off. Nobody ever questioned him when he ran system audits. Clarisse's phone calls, smug and self-assured, were time-stamped, transcribed, and cataloged. In one, she said plainly, guys like him grow up thinking they're owed something just because they survived. Well, not in my company. Jordan saved that one in a folder titled Endgame. But this wasn't just about revenge. It was never just about Clarisse. It was about the pattern, the rot behind the polished mission statements and glossy diversity brochures. Jordan began to hear from others, former interns, analysts, even a former black team lead who had mysteriously vanished after raising concerns in a performance review. One by one, they came forward. Some sent emails. Others called Amanda. A few just forwarded their resignation letters with cryptic lines like, I didn't have the strength to fight, but I'm glad someone finally does. Amanda's inbox became a mosaic of broken careers, stories too similar to ignore. A Latina developer given the same project 3 times under 3 different managers. An Asian American marketing lead forced to speak more American in meetings. A queer black engineer denied promotion because clients wouldn't relate. This isn't a case anymore, Amanda told Jordan. It's a movement. And yet through it all, Jordan kept his silence in public. He played with Alyssa, cooked dinner, repaired her little robotics kit when she accidentally fried the board. They sat on the couch one night watching a documentary on civil rights. Alyssa turned to him and asked, do you think they had to be scared every day? Jordan looked at her, eyes wide, innocent, trusting. Yeah, he said, but they also knew they weren't fighting just for themselves. Alyssa leaned against him, small and warm. You're like that, right? You're fighting too. He didn't answer. He just put an arm around her shoulders and whispered, I'm just making sure you don't have to. Meanwhile, Clarisse was preparing her next move. She'd instructed HR to tighten employee access logs, reissued new guidelines on internal investigations, and even sent out a company-wide memo about maintaining professionalism during times of transition. To her, this was cleanup, erasing any trace of uncertainty before investors could sniff it out. But she was too late. Jordan had already passed the Endgame folder to Amanda, who had forwarded it to a DOJ contact specializing in corporate civil rights violations. The official request for preliminary review was in motion, and Clarisse, she was still celebrating, still smiling at luncheons, still believing her narrative was winning, because people like her never saw the fall coming. They never believed the quiet ones were already 10 steps ahead. Monday morning came like any other. Clarisse walked into the office dressed in a crisp cream pantsuit, holding her usual overpriced coffee head, high and confident. She had a board meeting at 9 o'clock with investors at noon, and an executive lunch scheduled at the Metropolitan Club. Her calendar was full. Her mind was not. As far as she knew, the only thing left of the Jordan Hayes incident was the whisper of discomfort, and she'd already buried that under HR memos and casual conversations suggesting he had a history of overstepping. She didn't see it coming. At exactly 10:43 a.m., 2 federal agents entered the building, badges out, calm, measured. Jennifer from HR, pale and visibly shaken, followed behind them and knocked on Clarisse's office door. We need to talk, she said, her voice unsteady. Now. Clarisse didn't move at first. Is this about that Hayes thing I told you? Jennifer, we've already handled that internally. It's not HR, Jennifer interrupted almost in a whisper. It's the Department of Justice. They're here. For you. Clarice blinked. For the first time, she was no longer in control. In the glass-walled conference room, her confidence started to chip. Special Agent Carter sat across from her, calm and efficient. We're currently investigating systematic discriminatory practices at several large firms. Yours has come up repeatedly. He placed a government-issued tablet in the center of the table and tapped play. Her own voice filled the room. The problem with people like him is that they grow up thinking they deserve the same treatment as people who've actually built something in life. Clarice flinched. That's completely out of context, she said quickly. That conversation was private. Agent Carter tapped again. Another clip. A single black man against a respected white woman. The courts may act progressive, but credibility still matters. Clarice looked to Jennifer, then to the company's general counsel, who had arrived minutes earlier and now sat frozen beside her. This is illegal surveillance. Who recorded this? Agent Carter didn't answer. Instead, he slid a thick file across the table. Inside were transcripts, timestamps, email chains, HR performance scores, manipulated post-review, and a detailed timeline showing that the photo Clarice had presented as proof had been taken hours after Jordan had already left her building, confirmed by front door camera logs and vehicle GPS data. By the time Mr. Davidson, the company's CEO, entered the room, his face was drained of all corporate polish. Tell me this isn't real, Clarice, he muttered, voice brittle. Tell me this is some elaborate smear campaign. I can explain, she stammered, but he didn't let her finish. No. You've compromised everything. Our contracts, our reputation, our entire culture strategy. Agent Carter stood. We're not here to arrest you today, Ms. Monroe, but we are opening a federal inquiry, and we expect full cooperation. Effective immediately. It was over. Clarice sat in stunned silence as Davidson turned to the agents. She's suspended. Immediately. The company will cooperate fully. Outside whispers had already begun. Word traveled fast in a corporate tower. One by one, monitors lit up with internal alerts. The same name repeated in bold type, Clarice Monroe, under investigation. But across town, Jordan was helping Alyssa with her history project, an assignment on civil rights heroes. She was building a trifold poster with colored markers and cutout photos, and Jordan watched her quietly, marveling at how steady her hands were for someone so young. Dad, she said without looking up. Did people ever try to stop them from telling the truth all the time, Jordan said. Some tried to scare them. Some tried to make them disappear. So what did they do? They found another way to speak, he answered, one that couldn't be ignored. That evening, Amanda called. Her voice carried the weight of something bigger. Jordan, I just got confirmation. The DOJ is officially listing your case as central to a wider investigation into corporate discrimination in tech. This isn't just about your company anymore. This is going national. Jordan didn't celebrate. He didn't gloat. He simply looked over at his daughter, now asleep on the couch beside a book on Rosa Parks. He thought about the years of silence, the looks the condescension masked as politeness. He thought about Clarice, who believed power meant immunity, and he knew with a quiet certainty that power had never been the problem. What people do with it, that's what defines them. The next morning, Clarice didn't show up to the office. Her parking spot sat empty. Her assistant didn't know where she was, and her calendar, normally packed with overlapping meetings, was suddenly cleared. Word had spread, not just inside the building, but outside. Local media picked up a leak about the DOJ investigation. The headline on one popular news site read, "Whistleblower exposes racial bias at major fintech firm." The article didn't name Jordan, but everyone in the company knew. They just didn't know how much he knew, and that uncertainty, that silence, was louder than anything he could have said. Jordan stayed home like he had for weeks now. His official status was still under suspension, pending review, but it no longer felt like punishment. It felt strategic, a blessing even. He had space, he had time, and now he had momentum. Amanda updated him constantly. Clarice's legal team had gone from aggressive to defensive in a matter of days. The DOJ had frozen multiple company records for forensic review. The internal HR system showed dozens of suspicious edits to performance evaluations, almost all affecting Black and Latino employees. And the surveillance footage, it was airtight. Clarice's entire claim about the photo unraveled within minutes of being scrutinized. They know it was staged, Amanda told him. The timestamp, the metadata, the camera logs. She took that picture herself, Jordan. Hours after you left. It wasn't even on the same floor where she claimed you were. Jordan listened calm as always. And the recordings they're damning, Amanda said, especially the call with Margaret Thompson. The DOJ's forensic team enhanced the audio. You can hear Clarice say clear as day. At least I handled him before he had a chance to play the race card. Jordan didn't say anything at first, just a long, steady breath. Then she said that out loud, into a phone. She did, Amanda replied. And now that sentence is going to follow her for the rest of her life. Meanwhile, the board of directors held an emergency session. Clarice was officially removed as CEO. A public statement was released within hours. Effective immediately, Clarice Monroe is no longer affiliated with this company. We are cooperating fully with federal investigators. It was crisp, sterile, designed to preserve shareholders, not acknowledge wrongdoing. But for those who understood the language of corporate spin, the message was clear: they were cutting her loose. Jordan didn't gloat. He didn't post a victory tweet or share a triumphant status. Instead, he picked Alyssa up early from school and took her to the park. It was unusually warm for spring, and the sun felt different on his skin, lighter somehow. They sat on a bench near the playground while she ate her favorite ice cream. After a while, she asked, "Did they say sorry?" Yet Jordan smiled. "No, baby. People like that usually don't." "But they were wrong," she said. "They were. And they knew it." Eventually, he said, watching her carefully. "But the goal was never to make them say sorry." Then what was it? To make sure they couldn't do it again. She thought about that for a long moment, then nodded. "Good." Later that evening, Amanda called again. This time there was a different tone in her voice, not urgency, not strategy, but something closer to reverence. "You did something most people never even attempt," she said. "You didn't just defend yourself. You made space for others." Jordan looked out the window where the sky had gone from gold to deep blue. That was always the point, because the truth he knew was never just about clearing your name. It was about shifting the balance so the next man, the next woman, wouldn't have to carry the same silence. The park visit had done more for Jordan than he expected. Sitting beside Alyssa, answering her gentle but piercing questions, reminded him of what this had always been about: not vindication, not even justice in its traditional sense. It was about protection, about building a world where his daughter didn't have to grow up decoding hidden insults, guarding her brilliance, or proving her worth in rooms that refused to see it. And now that world, at least a small corner of it, had begun to shift. A few days after Clarice was removed, Jordan received an unexpected email. Subject line: an invitation to consult. It came from the founder of a venture-backed firm focused on ethical AI and corporate hiring. They'd heard about the case, the data Jordan had exposed, and the system he had built to quietly monitor bias and document workplace manipulation. "We believe your insight could change how corporate accountability is measured," the email read. "Would you be open to a conversation?" Jordan reread the message twice, then smiled. It wasn't a job offer. It was recognition of intelligence, of strategy, of value. The kind Clarice never saw in him, and probably never would have. Later that night, Amanda updated him on the wider investigation. Several executives who had worked closely with Clarice were being questioned. At least 2 other former employees had come forward with independent evidence of discrimination. What began as one man defending himself had grown into a case study. The DOJ, Amanda explained, was now using Jordan's files as a framework for a larger audit of hiring practices in the tech industry. "You're not just part of the story anymore," she said. "You're reshaping it." Jordan said little. He had always been careful with words, but inside something shifted just slightly. A feeling he hadn't let himself have in a long time: peace. Not because everything had been fixed, but because he'd finally stopped absorbing the damage in silence. The following morning, Alyssa bounced into the kitchen with a wide grin. "Guess what? Ms. Keller said I can do my school project on you." Jordan raised an eyebrow. "Me? Yeah," she said, climbing up onto a stool. "We're doing a presentation about people who make change without being loud. She said you're a perfect example." Jordan laughed, heartwarming in a way no award or title could ever replicate. Well, he said, placing a plate of pancakes in front of her, just make sure you include the part about me burning toast 3 times last week. She rolled her eyes. I'll leave that out. By the time Monday rolled around again, the company had a new interim CEO. Internal training on bias and inclusion was announced. But the change that mattered most wasn't in memos or rebranded mission statements. It was in how people looked at Jordan now. Not with suspicion, not with pity, but with a kind of quiet respect. The kind earned, not given. He didn't return to his old position. He didn't want it. He didn't need it. Instead, he agreed to speak on a panel, his first public appearance since the story broke. The event was focused on workplace equity in the tech sector, attended by leaders who finally seemed willing to listen. Backstage, before the panel began, Amanda found him sipping tea. "You nervous?" she asked. He shook his head. "I've had harder rooms," she smiled. "Just remember, your story isn't about taking someone down. It's about lifting the veil." Jordan nodded. "Yeah, and letting the truth breathe." As he walked on stage to a quiet round of applause, he thought of Alyssa at home, probably building something with her Legos or scribbling in her notebook. He hoped one day she'd grow up in a place where no one would try to weaponize her silence or underestimate her light. And if not, then she'd know exactly how to fight back with proof, with patience, and with purpose. After the panel ended, Jordan didn't linger. He shook a few hands, exchanged a couple business cards, and quietly stepped out through the side exit. Applause still echoed behind him, but he'd never been one to bask in spotlights. The auditorium lights might have dimmed, but his role wasn't over. Not even close. The story had gone national by then. Not just the scandal, those come and go, but the method. How he documented everything. How he stayed calm. How he turned evidence into power without shouting, accusing, or burning bridges that would have only led to more walls. Media outlets called him the quiet architect of accountability. But that wasn't how he saw it. He was just a man who refused to let someone rewrite his truth. One evening about a week later, Alyssa was sitting cross-legged on the floor, cutting out pieces of her school project board. At the top, in bright blue marker, she had written, "How my dad fought without raising his voice." Jordan leaned against the doorframe, watching her concentrate. "Need any help?" "Nope," she said proudly without looking up. "I already picked the quote." "Oh yeah, what quote?" She grinned. "We don't raise our voices, we raise our standards." He laughed softly. "That's a good one." "Where'd you hear it?" "Made it up," she shrugged. "Sounded like something you'd say." Jordan walked over, kissed the top of her head, and sat beside her. For a moment, they were just two people surrounded by glue sticks and poster board. No scandal, no press, no weight of systemic anything. Just a father and his daughter in a room filled with the kind of peace that's earned. But Clarice. She was nowhere near peace. Her legal team had filed motions, tried to delay the inevitable. But the federal case moved forward. Depositions were scheduled, subpoenas were issued, and the narrative she once controlled now belonged to courtrooms, not conference rooms. The same company that had once shielded her now treated her name like a PR virus. Still, Jordan didn't mention her anymore. Not to Alyssa, not to Amanda, not even to himself. Because to him, the point was never her downfall. It was everything that came after. He began working quietly with a group of former employees, some who had reached out after the case broke, others who had stayed silent for years. Together, they were building a nonprofit that would offer digital tools and legal support to employees facing workplace discrimination. No loud fundraising campaigns, no flash. Just real infrastructure. Protection, the kind he wished he'd had years ago. One night, Amanda sent him a text. "They're inviting you to testify before the Congressional Committee on Workplace Equity." "You ready?" Jordan stared at the message for a long time, then replied, "Wasn't trying to go that far." Her response came seconds later. "You didn't try. You led." He set the phone down, looked out the window. The city skyline shimmered under a quiet sky. He thought about everything, how close he'd come to losing his livelihood, his name, his future, and how by doing everything right, everything calm, everything precise, he had become undeniable. The next day, Alyssa turned in her project. Her teacher cried when she read it, not because it was dramatic, but because it was steady, clear, powerful in the way only truth can be when it's unflinching and unembellished. At bedtime that night, Alyssa looked up and asked, Do you think people like Miss Monroe ever change? Jordan paused, brushing hair from her face. Sometimes, he said, but not always. Then what happens to them? He thought for a moment. They get replaced. By better people. She nodded as if that answer made perfect sense. As she drifted off to sleep, Jordan sat there quietly, hand on her back, heartbeat slow and steady. No banners, no vengeance, just the lasting truth that when the world tried to erase him, he left a mark instead. Thank you for staying with us through this powerful story. If it moved you, inspired you, or made you think, please like, share, and subscribe. We'll keep telling stories that matter. Stories that remind us quiet doesn't mean weak, and justice doesn't always shout.